Yes. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from the audience around the globe. Hope you all are doing great and welcome back to Know Mam YouTube channel. Today, we have an interesting session on exploring Docker desktop and building Docker extensions by your own. To lead this session, we have my friend Mr. Harshvardhan as a speaker. He's working as a software engineer at Local Stack and he's a competitive programmer and open source enthusiast. So we'll hear more about Harsh from himself. And with that, I'll hand off stage to Mr. Harsh and let's get started and let's learn from Harsh today. Harsh, the
Uh,
stage is yours.
awesome. So thanks a lot, Cody, for this kind introduction. So, hi everyone. My name is Harsh, and currently I'm working as an engineer at Local Stack. So, Local Stack is basically an AWS service emulator. So, if you are a cloud application developer who is looking to test your AWS applications on your local machine, Local Stack basically facilitates that. And I have done some competitive programming when I was starting in college, but mostly I have been like working in open source for the past 2 or 3 years. And during this time, I did my Google Summer of Code and Google Season of Docs. And I continue to work in open source, helping out other folks, getting them started with some open source contributions and empowering them to make sure that they are creating some value in the whole open source ecosystem. So I guess for this session, we will be talking a bit about Docker Desktop, and we will also be exploring what Docker extensions are, because this is something that I have been working on for the past couple of months. And we will also explore how you can create your own extension with some of the basic examples that Docker itself has provided. And I guess that would be like a good head start for anyone who is looking to get started with Docker ecosystem overall. So yeah, shall I share my
Yes,
screen and maybe we can get started with
yes,
this?
yes,
Awesome.
please
So
go
I'll share my
ahead.
screen now. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to share my entire screen. I hope it is visible. Awesome. Cool. So let us take the first couple of minutes to discuss what exactly Docker Desktop is. So I guess in one of the past sessions that was organized on this very channel itself, one of the speakers talked in detail about what exactly Docker is. So just to reiterate upon that, Docker is a containerization tool that basically allows the developers to package their code, and not just the code, but also the dependencies, the environment, and all of the extra stuff that we require in a container, which can be basically hosted upon Docker Hub. So Docker Hub is a central image registry where we can host our Docker images. And you as a developer can basically pull these images, you can run those images, and you can just get started with doing whatever you want with them. So most of the times we run these images as a container. And using this container, we can create our applications. We can also deploy them. We can also share it across and do a lot of different stuff altogether. So this was released almost a few years back, and most of the time, our sole acquaintance with Docker is through the Docker CLI itself. So Docker CLI basically interacts with the Docker engine, and it provides you all of the functionalities to get started with containerizing your applications out there. But not a lot of people basically know about Docker Desktop. So Docker is not just a developer tool; it's also a company. And as a company, they have also released a host of different services and toolings out there, which can basically allow people to make their lives easier while using Docker. So one of the products over here is Docker Desktop, but definitely there are multiple other products as well. There is Docker Compose, then we have got Docker Hub, then we have got Docker Scout. And you can use these different tools all together to simplify your Docker development and testing. So for this session, we are going to be talking about Docker Desktop itself. So what exactly Docker Desktop is? So if you are a Windows or a Mac user, I guess one of the first acquaintances you will have with Docker is through the Docker Desktop itself. So Docker Desktop is basically a one-click installation option so that you can install Docker on your machine. And it provides a very nice user interface through which you can exactly interact with Docker and basically containerize your application. I guess my voice was just echoing a bit. I hope that's
Yes,
fine now. Yeah.
now it is better. Yes.
Awesome. So Docker Desktop is a one-click option so that you can just get started with containerizing your applications in the fastest way possible. And it has a very nice and a sleek user interface. that exactly makes it possible for you to get started with managing your images, managing your containers, controlling your developer environment. And with some recent updates right now, you can also use a new feature that is called as Docker extensions. So Docker Desktop was a huge boost to the productivity of multiple developers, including me, because we wanted a way to basically control all of these different options right here within the Docker, and to basically have a much fine-grained control upon our images and containers over here itself. So it has a lot of different functionalities altogether. It has got Docker extensions, it has got volume management, it has got dev environments, and it also integrates with some vulnerability scanning tools like Sneak, so that you can be sure that, okay, whatever images you're building, it is actually secure, and it should be something that the consumers would be ready to adopt without anything whatsoever. And all of these multiple toolings and all of these multiple features made the Docker Desktop quite a significant tooling that a lot of people are using across the globe. Now, there are some misconceptions that, okay, Docker is a paid feature right now, so there are certain limitations which you might face while using Docker Hub and Docker Image. But for most part, it is completely free to be used by community users. So if you're a Docker enthusiast and you're getting started with Docker for the very first time, and you want a reliable way through which you can build images, you can check out your containers, you can do some vulnerability scanning, I guess Docker Desktop is quite a niche tool for you to get started with. So it has got a lot of toolings. It has got a lot of different content like blogs, videos, including community mentorship, so that you can easily get started with using Docker and you can grow within the whole Docker ecosystem itself. So for people who are looking to use the professional version of Docker Desktop, they have their own separate pricing plan. And you can definitely check this out if you're a part of a company. But for most part, I guess you can simply use the personal plan itself, which includes a Docker Desktop, unlimited public repositories, usage of Docker Engine plus Kubernetes, and you can also pull almost 200 images every 6 hours, including unlimited scope tokens. Now, if you're a startup or if you're growing inside a company over there, you might want to consider using the pro plan or the team plan or maybe even the business plan, but that completely depends upon your needs itself. So I hope.
Harsh, just to I have one
Mhm.
quick question. So, like
Yeah.
you said, the Docker desktop is available only for Windows and Mac. So
Yep.
traditionally, what we are using is like been using Docker CLI for all this,
Hmm.
which made very much simpler, and we have very limited set of commands whenever you want to fit in a Docker pull, Docker Docker run.
Yep.
So like that, we
Yep.
are feeling very much easy in using. So what might be
Yep.
the major differences, when, like you said, you are using pretty much Docker desktop these days. So what are the
Yep.
major differences you observed using Docker CLI and Docker desktop, and
Hmm.
how much it means in terms of productivity? Also, you mentioned. Can you explain
Yep.
these 2 points in
Yeah,
this way?
definitely. Definitely. So Docker Desktop is also available for Linux right now. So back when I started with Docker, it was on a Windows machine. So I had a lot of trouble setting up Docker back then. So I was pretty much using Docker Desktop and I was not able to understand, look, okay, what's the difference between Docker Desktop and the Docker CLI? Because both of them were almost simplistic for me to use and it was easy for me to just control the basic stuff. The next place where I exactly started using Docker was upon a ThinkPad. So I was using something called as Red Hat Enterprise Linux back when I was working at Red Hat. And over there, we initially had Podman installed, but I just removed that installation to start using Docker. So I was pretty much well acquainted with Docker CLI over there, and I found it quite easy to use and quite flexible to work with. But when I started adopting Mac, so over Mac, you have to directly install Docker Desktop to get started with Docker CLI itself. So with Docker Desktop, I got a lot of different functionalities that I found quite easy to use. The very first one was that I could easily check out all of the images that I have present on my machine, and I don't have to run a separate CLI command to check out all of the images that I have present over here.
You mean
Apart
to
from
say
this,
like everything is in form of UI and it is easy to
exactly,
look into it?
exactly,
Okay, okay.
exactly. Apart from this, we also have got this option for containers. So we can definitely get to check which container is running right now, what's the image that it is running from, which port are they running over, and all of these things all together. Docker has recently released a dev environment itself where you can define the configuration as code. And this will allow you to basically control your developer environment and share it quickly with your team members itself. Using this, like over Mac and Windows, we have also got these preferences. And through this, you can also like configure multiple different options, including like how much resource you want to share to your Docker setup, like how many CPUs, how much amount of memory, how much amount of swap, and all of these things. And if you're a developer who is working upon Kubernetes, I guess Docker Desktop has got quite some nice features over there. But for me, the break feature was the extensions part, because now you can integrate some third-party toolings with your Docker desktop setup. And a lot of different companies, especially in developer tooling, are creating their own extensions right now. And you can use these extensions to basically simplify your overall development workflow itself. So I guess all of these features made the Docker desktop something that's really good for my own needs. But again, if you're someone who is very well acquainted with Docker CLI and you don't basically need some extra features altogether, I guess you can be simply fine with that. You don't exactly need Docker desktop in those particular cases. I hope I make sense now.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. So if you want to install Docker desktop, I guess the very first thing that you can do is to like click upon this option. It will install the Docker desktop in your case. If you're using Mac, maybe you want to check whether you want to install it for the Intel or for the M1 chip. But I guess it should be just fine at the end of the day. And once it is done, you will have this nice visual application right over here. And this is where you can easily get started with using Docker Desktop for the first time. So if you're a Mac and Windows user, as I just mentioned before, Docker Desktop would be the first thing that you need to do if you want to install Docker. And once it is done, then it is really easy peasy for you to just get started with running your Docker workflows and all of these things. If you want to find documentation about Docker Desktop, I guess Docker Desktop has some really nice documentation right over here. It will guide you through like how to install Docker Desktop, what permissions are needed in, what sort of features can you easily explore. And if you install Docker Desktop for the very first time, it will also run you through a very small tutorial to make sure that you understand on how you can use a Docker Desktop and how you can get started with that. So I hope this pretty much explains what Docker Desktop is. And if you go on Docker Desktop for the first time, you will see that we have got multiple different options right here. We have got this option called as containers. And this is where you can get to check which containers are pretty much running right now. So since I'm working at local stack, I have this local stack container running over here. So maybe I can just stop that container right here. So I'm just using my CLI for this particular option. And this will stop my container. And once it is stopped, you can basically get to see that no container is running on the Docker Desktop UI. Okay, that's taking some time. Yeah, I guess the container is stopped running right now. So you can definitely get to see that there are no running containers. There is a toggle option right here. So if you just click upon that, you can get to see like which containers are present, but they are not running right now, and which containers are exactly running. The best part with the Docker Desktop is that if you see that there is a particular container which is running right now, you can exactly click upon a specific command option, and that will allow you to exec into that particular container and run your commands directly from the container itself. So if you're someone who is looking into developing and testing your own images and containers, I guess it provides quite a feasible way for you to like test your applications inside a Docker container itself. And
Okay,
of
you
course,
mean to say
yeah,
like there is no need of executing this Docker
exactly,
exec-it. So those things are
exactly.
not required. Everything is from UI.
Yeah, everything is from UI itself. So it will give you a command
Awesome.
line and you can just run everything from there itself. I guess that's one of the best options that I checked out when I installed Docker Desktop for
Yeah,
the very first
really,
time.
really. Yes, it will be very
Yep,
much helpful.
yep. The second option that we have is the images part. So as many people might know, that image is just a read-only template. You can just think of this as a boilerplate or maybe a blueprint. And we basically use these images to run our containers. So I have got multiple images right here. Most of these images are related to local stack itself. Uh, and you can definitely get to see like how much images you have right now and how much memory is it consuming and how much is still left right now. So this can give you a very holistic view about all of the images that you have on your local machine. And let us say you want to delete a particular image. So you can just go and click upon this particular option and you can either check out the details of this image right here. And the best part about this is that you can exactly check each and every layer of your Docker image and see how much memory is it exactly consuming. Like I can show you a much more complex example. let me show you the example of local stack itself, because it's a fairly large image, 1.89 GB. So we really want to see like how much memory is being consumed by each and every layer. So you can see like there are almost, yeah, I guess everyone is getting cold these days, including me.
Yes.
Yeah. So as you can see, like it has got almost 76 layers right here. And you can just get to see like how much memory is each layer basically contributing to this. And this is a very good way for you to exactly analyze like why is your image so bloated and why is it so huge in size, and what you can exactly do to basically decrease the size of your Docker image. I'm not sure how much time will this take, and I'm not sure like if this is exactly going to succeed because I'm not signed into my Docker desktop. But with this integration, you can exactly analyze all of these cyber security vulnerabilities right over here. And you can get to see like what kind of packages you have installed inside your Docker image that might be vulnerable to external attacks, and what can you exactly do to basically mitigate them. We have also got this option of
Okay.
packages and images, which I guess is not accessible to me because I've not signed up right here. They might be part of the pro plan. I'm not exactly sure about that. But this gives you a very holistic overview of what are the things that you can basically do with the images inside your own Docker desktop UI itself. Let's see if I pick up a bit smaller example right here. Okay, I have this Alpine image. Let's see if this one is gonna work out a bit. Yeah. So I can get to see the vulnerabilities. There is this zlib vulnerability, there is OpenSSL, there is BusyBox. So these are the specific vulnerabilities that I can see the Alpine image. I can get to see all of the packages that I have installed inside my image. And yeah, I can get to see like the images that is basically inheriting from this. And I can do more actions with this particular thing. I can either pull this image from Docker Hub. If you're not familiar with what Docker Hub is, then it's basically a central image registry where you can find all of the Docker images hosted right here. So if you're doing, let's say, a Docker pull Alpine, uh, most of the time it will be pulling directly from Docker Hub itself, unless you have some other image registry configured right here. So you can see like Alpine images right here. It has been pulled almost a billion times, and it has got some 9.7K stars. And you can see all the information that you need regarding this particular image right over here. So we have got Alpine 3.14, and we have got this image right here, which is inheriting from this image itself. And you can either pull it from Docker Hub, or else you can also push it to Docker Hub itself. But in that case, you might have to change the namespace. In this case, the username that we have upon Docker Hub is exactly serving as a namespace itself. Or else if you want,
Harsh,
yeah,
one question here, one simple question. Like,
yeah,
instead of usually when we are trying to pull an image, right, we'll go to
yeah.
command line and there we'll see Docker pull, those kind of things. If I want
Mhm.
to do the same, can I do it from Docker desktop or I need to go to
Yeah,
terminal or something?
I guess it can be done through Docker Desktop. So there is a search option right here.
Okay.
If I just go and click upon images, like let us say I want to pull the Node.js image. Sorry, I did the wrong thing. Yeah. So we see this node image right here. Like let us say I want to pull this. We do get
Okay.
to see that there is this option of using tags. So either I can pull the latest tag, or else I can pull the dev tag, or else I can pull the LTS, which is the latest long-term release tag.
Okay.
And yeah, that would be it. So I can just click upon the pull option, and you can see that this image is being pulled right here. So this
Awesome.
makes it easy,
Awesome.
and you
Yes.
don't need to
Yes.
go upon CLI, and you don't need to say like, okay, Docker pull this particular image, and it has been pulled. So if I just close this, yeah, it must have been pulled right here. Yeah, there is this node image right over here, and I can get to see all the vulnerabilities, the images that it is part of, and all the packages that I have right here. If I want to run this particular image as a container, I can also click upon this option called as run, and I can configure some optional settings if you want. Like I can say like the container name should be Node.js. I can set up the volumes. I can set up some environmental variables. I guess this is something that you should be aware of. And I can just click upon run itself. Okay, so in this case, something has gone wrong because I've not specified any commands. But I guess if you're running a particular extension for the first time, like I was not familiar with this particular image, but let's say I want to run this local stack image. I guess it should run without any other options right here. And there you are. So I'm running this particular local stack image, and you will get to see the logs of this particular image right here. You can also inspect like how this particular container is particularly running. And you can also exec inside the terminal. So if you remember, I mentioned about like executing inside the container itself. This was the thing that I was basically talking about. I am trying to zoom it a bit, so I can pretty much say like the things that I really want to work with. I guess this pretty much makes it clear like how easy it is for you to use like Docker Desktop itself to analyze your containers, your images, and more of that. Cool. So that was pretty much about images itself. Apart from this, we also have got volumes. So volumes is basically a mechanism so that you can persist the data that is being generated and used by the Docker containers. Uh, Again, like if you want to configure volumes, you can pretty much do it from the Docker desktop itself without having to create a separate compose file or doing it by the CLI, which almost seems quite complex to do. And finally, we have got a new feature by Docker Desktop, which I unfortunately am not quite aware of. But this is something that they call as dev environments. And if you click upon the documentation, they might walk you through what exactly it is. But as per the Docker Desktop docs, they mentioned that this is a configurable developer environment, which will contain all the code, all the tools that is necessary for you to get started with. And you can also share it across with your team members, and you can just get started with working around this environment itself. So it is also part of the Docker CLI. So you just don't need to depend upon the Docker desktop itself to basically use this around. And you can just use this to simplify your entire process. Cool. So that was pretty much all of the things that I wanted to discuss about the Docker desktop. So Koti, what do you think about this? Are you convinced like, okay, Docker desktop is something that a lot of Docker users might find interesting?
Yes, what I feel was is, it's pretty much easy. No need to memorize a lot of commands as going. Everything is just in front of us, and just like if I want to pull an image or whatever, just now we saw. So you can search there, you can pull there, and you can select. It's just like drag and drop option. So everything is
Exactly.
sitting just in front of you in your local machine, and it is giving the feasibility to fetch whatever you want. So I
Yep.
really liked it. I personally haven't explored much, but
Hmm.
it sounds very much interesting. Yes.
Awesome. Sounds great. So now that we have explored Docker extensions a bit, I guess we can, sorry, Docker desktop a bit, I guess we can jump into extension. What do you think about that?
Yes, wonderful. Well, definitely.
Awesome. So one of the main features that made me switch to using Docker desktop itself for most of the part is the extensions thing. I have installed most of the extension that I have uninstalled most of the extension that I was using because I wanted to start from fresh, just to showcase how you can install an extension for the first time, or like how you can build your own extension if you want to explore using Docker extensions itself. So just as a disclaimer, extension is part of the beta feature, so it is still not stable, and a lot of the APIs that you might end up using might change in the future after all. But the Docker desktop team is quite receptive, and they're quite reactive on like having people on board to extensions feature. And I guess if some things break for you in the future, you can just immediately reach out to them, and they will be able to provide you a fix or something that might be able to optimize your workflow. So, as I mentioned before, extension is a feature that Docker released almost last year in one of their conferences, where they basically build this out to make sure that you can integrate third-party toolings within the Docker desktop itself. So previously, what used to happen is like there were a lot of products and there were a lot of developer tooling that were using Docker as one of the most integral features, but people wanted a way to use sort of a user interface, a sort of a like a simplistic way of like controlling their toolings or controlling their features and all of that. Now, most of these products had their own software as a service, basically a web application where they can do a lot of things. But people still wanted to do something on their own local machine itself without having to go to a web browser, without having to control everything from there, because the experience might be a bit sluggish and it is not something that people would expect. And if you check out some other products in the whole space, like we have got VS Code, we have got plenty of other products. Most of them are using these third-party plugins called an extension to basically extend the functionality. I guess everyone who has used VS Code might just confirm to this fact that extension is something that they cannot live without. Whether it is controlling the theme or whether it is setting up a linter or whether it is like setting up the formatting, I guess everyone is looking out for some extension so that we can extend the feature of the whole product that we have at hand. So Docker wanted to do something like this, and that's the reason they explored and they like released this particular feature. And it is not something that Docker is controlling entirely. If you're working in a company and let us say you think that, okay, I need this particular extension within my own Docker distro workflow, Docker is providing you the functionality, it is providing you the ways through which you can build your own extension and you can release it out within your own Docker desktop workflow. But if you want to put out an extension for the public usage, you might have to go to the Docker because they have their own submission process and they can work with you to make sure that everything is fine-tuned, everything is optimized before you actually submit the extension to the Docker extensions marketplace. So if I
Has
speak,
just one thing to make sure that whatever we created extension here in our
Mhm.
local mission, it won't be
Yep.
exposed to external world. So it's just
No, not at all.
experimenting and okay, okay,
Yep.
great, great.
So
Yes.
in this case, what you can also do is like, let us say I built out an extension for my own personal use case. I have a team of like 5 or 6 people, and I just want them to use a developer tool that is not yet released as a Docker extension. I will build out an extension. I'll convert that into a Docker image. I'll put that up on Docker Hub. It can be a public image, it can be a private image, whatever suits you. And I can ask my other team members to basically pull this image and install the extension through that itself. I can show you how this process looks like in just a few minutes. But this is how you can privately build out extension and you can share it across your team members. None of that will be exposed to the general public because to do that you have to go through the Docker team itself, and they have their elaborate extension release plan, which you have to basically adhere to. I hope that is
Okay.
clear.
Yes, yes, that's clear. Please go
Yep,
ahead.
sure. So I have this extensions feature here. To basically install an extension, the first thing that you need to do is to go up on the preferences. And there is this particular tab over here called as extensions. And you need to go and click upon enable Docker extension. Because once you do that, you are basically giving the functionality to the Docker desktop to make sure that you can install, uninstall, and enable all the extension features. You can also click upon these other boxes. You can say like, okay, on your Docker desktop, you only want the extension that are distributed through the Docker marketplace. So these means that only the official Docker extensions can be published on my Docker desktop itself, or else you can just check out all the Docker desktop extension internal containers while you're using Docker commands. I guess these two things are not necessary for me.
Uh,
Mhm.
yes, your voice is break for 2 seconds. Yeah, now it is fine. Yes.
Yep. So I was just saying like these two features are not necessary for me. I just want the enable Docker extensions feature. So I've just enabled it right here. If you're doing this for the first time, you might need to enable this and you might need to restart your Docker desktop. But since I've already done that, I can just click upon cancel. And this will give me this whole extensions tab along with this whole beta flag right here. And this is giving me enough incentive to just get started using the extension itself. So to install an extension, you can first of all go to the add extensions option. And this is where you can get to see the extensions marketplace. So extensions marketplace is basically a holistic overview of all the extensions that you can install on your Docker desktop. And you can get to see like all of the extensions that you can particularly install right here. And there are also like different categories through which you can install extension. For example, you need a category like you're working out with a lot of databases. So you need an extension that might be able to work out with your favorite database. So you can just go and click upon the database extension, and you can get to see all of the different extensions that are available for database users. So there is the open source management tool for PostgreSQL. There is the Oracle SQL CL client tool. There is a Nebula Graph, which I guess is a pretty new extension that they released almost a couple of days or maybe weeks back. And that's the reason it is showing me unsupported on my machine because I need to upgrade my Docker desktop. But in a similar manner, you can check out different extensions right here. There is Kubernetes, there is networking, there is image registry. I guess it is taking some time. Then there is a security extension, there are testing tools, there are utility tools, and there are more of them. I guess one of the most popular extensions over here is the disk usage and the logs explorer, because both of these extensions is pretty handy to use. So let us maybe try to install the disk usage itself. So this extension will try to show you like how much of the disk space is basically being used by Docker. And you can reclaim all of that space within just one click. So you don't have to basically go and select Docker RM this particular image, or Docker RM this particular container, or Docker RMI this particular image to remove out all of those images and containers that you no longer use. So disk usage has been installed. You can just go and click upon the disk usage itself, and it shows me like, okay, this is how much space that I can reclaim if I remove out most of the unused Docker images and containers from my machine. And if I just want to do that, I can just go and click upon reclaim space. And I will have the options to either remove the stopped containers or unused images or dangling images, or maybe some build cache or unused volumes. And based upon that, Docker Desktop will simply clean out all of those resources that we have verified to be cleaned. And this is pretty much handy because you can immediately check out like all of the things that you can remove out, and you can do that in a completely reactive manner. So you don't have to like wait for like a few months to spend, so that you can easily revisit these kind of things and you can just remove them out. And this is a pretty handy feature for a lot of developers because this is a pretty large space that a lot of developers consume while using Docker, and they're simply unaware about that. So Koti, what do you think about
Okay.
this?
Yeah, it is very much wonderful. I was just thinking that same. Like traditionally, if you want to do first thing, like we'll see Docker images and Docker PS, where I'll
Exactly.
get a list of containers, and I need
Yep.
to, before removing, I need to double check whether somewhere it is using or not. I'm not
Yep.
sure. So it might be stopped accidentally, and that container and that image I need accidentally, if I
Hmm.
remove it, it will be very difficult for me to again pull that, run that. So it is giving all these options here, and know what are the things. Yeah, it's awesome, awesome. Yes.
Awesome. So that was about the disk usage. So disk usage is part of the official Docker extension itself. So it has been released by the Docker team itself. So you might see like a lot of support coming for this extension. Apart
Yes.
from this, like there are some other third-party extension that people are building and releasing out. I guess Portainer happens to be one of the most popular third-party extension that has been released, and it is basically for container management. And they have their own web application that most of the people use. Uh, Now there are some other extensions in the whole like scene. There is an open source management tool for PostgreSQL. I guess a lot of database developers might be using this. There is a Sneak extension that allows you to scan your remote or local Docker images and just find out any of the CVEs that these images might contain. There is a JFrog, which exactly does the same thing as Sneak. There is a Newman, which allows you to run your Postman collection. Then there is the OpenShift. OpenShift is basically a Kubernetes distribution that is released by Red Hat. Almost 2 years back, I was working with the OpenShift team itself. And
Okay.
one of these extensions is the local stack extension that my team developed. So it has got almost 4.3K installs. And we can like just give this a run because local stack allows you to like run your AWS applications like completely on your local machine. So to get started with this,
Okay.
I can just click upon this install button. Yep. So if you see what is happening right here, for any extension to be installed, the Docker image is basically pulled from the Docker Hub. And using this, the extension is being installed. So all of these Docker extensions are basically hosted upon Docker Hub itself. And if you want to go and check that out,
Basically,
mhm,
right? So it is just giving manually what are the steps we are following. It is,
exactly,
buckled up and packaged at one place. And when you click on just, get this extension on that
yep,
install button, in one click, it is executing all those commands and bringing up everything to our mission.
exactly. So if I just go on my GitHub repository, you might be able to check it out that you can do the same thing from your own local machine itself. So Docker CLI has got this nice option that allows you to like just use this command and pull this particular extension onto your local machine. The Docker desktop is basically just a handy way of doing this from your user interface, nothing much. Cool. So now that you can see that the local stack extension has been installed, so I can close this option and I can basically open this extension right here. And while this extension is being opened for the very first time, it might just ask you to like select the username where this local stack will be mounted. So this is where the local stack volume is basically being saved. And now what you can do is like you can basically go and click upon this confirm button, and that's it. Like the extension has been installed. In the other case, if you're doing it by the CLI, we have a Python PyP package that you might need to install. And using that CLI, you need to control your local stack container. But over here, you're doing pretty much everything from the Docker desktop itself. So if I go and click upon the start button, this will kickstart local stack itself. And
Yeah, one quick question, Harsh, right
yeah,
here. Like you mentioned, if I want to interact with all these AWS resources, I can do that from here, right? How
yeah.
usually, like if I wanted to, provide these kind of things, I need to have
Hmm.
AWS CLI, and then
Hmm.
I'll go ahead and use that AWS configure. command, and there I'll configure all those details, right? So
Exactly.
like that, what kind of configuration that I need to made to fetch these kind of details here?
Almost none. So that's the good part about using local stack. So if I just go to docs.localstack.cloud,
Okay.
I might not just want to make this session about local stack itself, so I'll just do it really quick. But yeah, over here, there is a user guides, and over here we have the integrations. AWS CLI happens to be the most popular integration right here. So all
Okay.
that you need to do is do the pip install AWS CLI, or maybe like uh, use Homebrew to basically install AWS CLI itself. What AWS basically provides is that there is this option called as the endpoint URL. So if you start local stack for the first time, you might see in the logs that local stack is running upon 0.0.0. Colon 4566. So 4566 over here is basically the edge port where all of these resources that you see right here are being exposed. So this is the edge port. And if you're using the AWS CLI, what you can just do is like you can create your command and you can just add this particular flag called as endpoint URL, and you can just say to them like, okay, the endpoint URL should not be the official production AWS URL. It should be the localhost 4566. And all of the requests that you will be making to the AWS using the AWS CLI, that will be sent to the local stack itself and not to the real AWS.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, you
Which
can
way
also set up
gives
the
more
AWS.
security as well. We are not
Exactly.
exposing the exact
Yeah.
thing production level.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can set up the AWS access key ID. You can set up the AWS secret access key. You can set up the AWS default region. And there you are. You can just get started using that. And none of the production like variables or none of these environmental variables will be exposed to us. None at all.
Okay.
To provide some extra sense of security, we also have our own CLI. And this CLI is basically a wrapper on top of AWS CLI itself. So we call this AWS local. And you can just install it by using pip install AWS CLI local itself. And by installing this, we are not taking up any of the like variables that we have configured right here. All that you need to do is to just say AWS local S3 LS, and that's pretty much it. You're not even using the official AWS CLI. You're just using the wrapper script that we have developed, and it has got all of the options configured, so you don't have to like set up this endpoint URL over and over again. Would you like to see up a demo?
Yes, yes. We are
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, sure. So what I can do is like I can just go and say AWS local, and I can say AWS local S3 LS. And as soon as I do that, like I have not created any buckets, but as you can see, like this command has executed successfully. So if I go to my local stack Docker extension, and if I go and check out the logs, you can get to see that this particular API request is successful because it has a 200 status code. So this is how local stack is basically emulating all of these different services over here. If I go up on system status, you can get to see that S3 is running right now. So that means that we have invoked an S3 API and it is almost running. It is in the running stage itself. What I can do is like I can just go ahead and I can basically create some sort of a bucket. And now if I do like, let's say AWS local S3 LS, you can get to see that I have created a bucket called as my bucket right here. And if I go back up on the logs, I can get to see that the list buckets command that we did at the first time was successful. The create bucket API is successful. The list buckets is successful. So that means whatever API request that we are sending to the AWS local, it is exactly being sent to the local stack, and all of these are pretty much running on our local machine. So now you have a complete local AWS emulator on your machine right now, and you can get to work around with all of these services that are present over here. So not just S3, but also SES, SNS, SQS, even Lambdas, Kinesis, Elasticsearch, and all of these things right over here. I guess that was a good demonstration of both the Docker extension and local stack as well.
Yes, yes. It is wonderful.
Awesome. And if you want to like remove out all of these resources, you don't have to go and manually delete these resources that you have created. You can just go ahead and click upon the stop button, and this will delete all of the resources that you have created. So if I just go back once again, and if I just say AWS local S3 LS, it will give me an error because now I have closed the Docker container. The edge port is no longer available, and all of the resources that I created has been deleted. So local stack by nature is ephemeral. So that means every resource that you're creating, if you just remove that container, all of those resources will be deleted, which is not the case with AWS. If some of the resources fail to delete, you have to manually go to all of these resources and manually delete them out, which is quite much of a pain.
Yes.
especially in development and testing, where you tend to create a lot of resources at the same time.
And one more
Awesome.
thing there, right? If you miss any of the resource, we'll end up paying high, oh, no, lot of bills.
Ex-
That is also
Exactly.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So local stack was just one example that I showed because I worked with local stack extension itself, but there are tons of other popular extensions right here. So just go onto the extensions marketplace, check out the extensions that are present over here. And if you see that, okay, there are some extensions that I want, but they no longer have that extension or they have not currently built any such extension right now, you can go to Collabnix organization. So Collabnix is basically one of the communities that has been created by Ajit Singh Rana. He was a Docker captain, and currently he's one of the developer relations engineer at Docker itself. So he has been advocating for extensions quite a lot, and I guess it was his motivation that led us to develop the Docker extension for local stack itself. So he
Yes.
maintains this repository uh, called as Docker Community Extension, and you can just go and check it out, and you can also request for a particular extension right there. Yeah. So he has his own Discord server. So just go ahead and say like, okay, I want an extension for this particular developer tooling or this particular software. And Ajit might be able to guide you to build that extension, or he might be able to rope in some community members so that they can contribute in building that particular extension.
Yeah,
Otherwise, there are
we have
some,
interacted multiple times with Ajit, like no, in multiple
yeah,
meetups and all. He's like
yeah,
a go-to person for any of the beginner or expert. Like if you somebody wanted to learn and build something,
yeah,
he'll definitely give us a supporting hand in any given time.
yeah, definitely. And this was just about the official extension that has been supported by Docker. There are multiple unofficial Docker extension that has been created by community members. For example, there is a Grafana Docker extension, there is the uh, Redis Inside Docker extension, there is a new 4G Docker extension. So if you don't find a particular extension on the marketplace, there are high chances that someone in the community has created that extension. The only thing that it is not being officially supported, so you might run into some issues or you might run into some bugs that might not be supported by an official company itself. So you might have to just circumvent around that. But again, it's something that you can simply work around with for the time being. Cool. So that was it about the extensions part. So what do you think? Shall we try to hack around an extension and build an extension for ourselves?
That's what we are looking for actually. So
Yep.
we saw a lot of things. So yeah, if we
Mhm.
see one extension building from scratch, it will be very much helpful to get started.
Exactly. So in this case, like since we are almost short on time, I guess almost 10 minutes now, what I'm gonna do is like I can try to take up some default examples that Collabnix is providing and the Docker extension is providing, and just try to hack around that to basically showcase like how you can build out an extension for yourself. So the good thing about extensions is that it has got a very detailed guide on how you can build out an extension. The very first thing that you need to take care of is how the whole architecture looks like. So there is a very good overview of how extensions are basically structured. So every Docker extension has got three things. It has got a front end, which is the user interface. You can just simply consider this as the very same local stack example that you see right here. That's a basic user interface, which you can either build in React or Vue or even plain JavaScript. And you can use this to basically make sure that the user can interact with your extension. Apart from this, there is a backend. And this backend is basically one or multiple containerized services that are running inside a Docker desktop VM. And finally, there are the executables. So these can be the shell scripts, these can be the binaries. The Docker desktop is basically copying on the host when they're installing the extension. So if you remember what was happening the first time when I was installing the local stack extension, it was basically asking me the location where local stack will be mounted. So this was the place where we were trying to install the local stack extension so that you can easily interact with that. And I guess this architecture diagram basically makes this clear. So if you are creating an extension for the first time, you have to not only work upon the front end, you have to also work upon the backend part, and you have to also work upon the backend executable so that you can be sure that whatever functionality the extension is providing, the user is exactly be able to use that itself. And I guess this basically forms the entire purpose of the Docker extension part. I hope I made myself clear.
Yes, yes.
Cool. So there is a simple quick start guide right here that basically explains to you like how you can create an extension for the first time. And to just get started with that, we have a very handy CLI that the Docker itself is providing to us. So if I just go and click, say, Docker extension, you can get to see that Docker extension CLI basically provides us the functionality so that you can initialize a Docker extension based upon a template. You can install the extension. You can list out the Docker extensions that you have installed. So if I just say like Docker extension ls, I can get to see that I have installed the local stack, Docker desktop, and the Docker's disk usage extension right over here. And this gives me a way to basically check out all of the extensions that is present on my Docker desktop through the CLI itself. But that's not what we are looking at. We will be first trying out setting up a Docker extension using this init command right here. So what I'm going to do is like I can just say like Docker extension init. Okay. Just give me a second. Yeah. And what you basically need to do is to give this a valid directory name. So I can say like Docker extension init my extension. And once we do that, it is basically asking me different options right here. Like what should be the title of my extension? Like what exact framework should I be using with my extension and all of these different options. So I can say like the title of my extension can be Hirsch Casper. That's my GitHub username. I can give it a description like sample Docker extension. I can give it a vendor. If I'm releasing this particular extension from some particular company or team, I can just mention that. Let's say I'm just saying Hirsch Casper. Image repository where this extension will be pushed. I can say for now, Hirsch Casper extension. And once this is done, it will start initializing an empty Git repository in this particular directory right here. And what it will do is like it will basically create a backend service using Golang. And it will initialize the Go module. It will install all the dependencies that might be required for me to run this particular extension. Once that is done, it will start initializing a React app. And this React app will be basically exposed to my Docker desktop itself. So even this extension that you see right here has been entirely built using React. But again, you're completely flexible to use whatever framework or whatever library you want to use with. And the Docker team is basically working upon to support as many ways through which you can build out the user interface for your Docker extension.
Ash, one quick question here. Like, as it is
Yeah.
running purely on this Go and all, do we need to
Mhm.
have Go installed in our machine? Like, what are the basic prerequisites apart from Docker desktop that we need to have?
So apart from Docker desktop, I guess you might not need Go, but the only thing with this is like everything will be containerized. So if I just show you the whole code right here, this starts the VS code right over here. And if I click upon the my extension, this is how the directory structure basically looks like. So
Okay.
as you might be able to see, just give it a moment. So we have got a file called as metadata.json. This is where you can get to see the icon of your Docker extension. The VM is where the containerized backend service will be present. And this will be basically mounted upon our Docker desktop. And this is basically where we will be able to interact with all of the functionalities that we want within our Docker extension. And we have the UI. And this is where you will be able to see that the source of this entire thing will be an index.html. So no matter what framework or what library are you using, if you're building this out and if everything is being stored inside a single index.html, it can be exposed by the Docker desktop itself. So since it is being containerized, you don't exactly need like Golang or anything installed on your local machine except Docker. But again, it is a certain prerequisite because you might be able to like test out a lot of different things. So in that case, having Golang installed on your machine would be quite preferable, in my opinion.
Okay,
I hope I
okay.
make
But it
myself
is
clear.
not mandatory. It is not
It is
mandatory
not
if it is
mandatory.
there. Got
Yeah.
it, got it.
If
Yes, please go ahead. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, because if you see the Docker file right here, you might be able to see that it is a multi-stage Docker file. So we are basically using the Golang's base image to build the entire backend and make sure that it is being mounted upon the VM. And then we are basically like building this entire front end over here. And finally, we are setting up labels because once you're publishing the Docker extension for the very first time, it will actually verify all these labels and make sure that everything is being set properly. Because if these labels are not set properly, the Docker team will not allow you to publish this extension on the official extensions marketplace. So
Okay,
this is
okay.
something
It
that
is
you
the
need to satisfy.
standard practice that you are suggesting us. Okay.
Exactly. So to make sure that the standard practice is being followed, there is a CLI command called as Docker extension validate. Maybe I can show you that.
Okay.
So if you say this particular validate command, I'm trying to validate my own local stack Docker desktop itself. So what it will check is like it will check your image labels, it will check your metadata file, it will check your image tag, which should be following the semantic versioning. It will check if your image is multi-platform. It should not be just built for this particular architecture. It should be built for ARM or AMD or whatever you're using. And if all of these things are being satisfied, it will make sure that your extension is passing all the validation checks. And now you can go upon this particular link so that you can submit this extension for the official like marketplace release. This is something that you should be
Okay,
doing if you
okay.
are a company that is trying to build out an official Docker extension.
Wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful. So everything we are getting here only. Yes.
exactly. So this is our backend service. As you can see, like this is a simple Golang backend, and it will have like a very simple JSON message that it will pass to the front end itself, which I'm going to demonstrate in just a couple of minutes. And then there is a front end over here. The one thing that you need to remember about Docker extension is that it has its own SDK that you need to use. So you can get to see that it has its own extension API client, and it provides all of the functionalities that you need to basically interact with your backend and make sure that all of the functionalities are being satisfied. It is also using Material UI because that's the like the design style, sorry, the design guide that Docker Desktop is using for its own products. So you need to satisfy these requirements as well, and everything is being documented right over here. So Docker has got a specific documentation piece on the UI styling guidelines. So you basically need to use React plus Material UI if you just want to like make sure that your application is satisfying all of the design requirements. And they have a couple of best practices. They have a couple of guides that you need to follow. And if something is going amiss, I guess the Docker team will just support you in the whole process to make sure that your Docker extension is satisfying these kind of requirements as well. So these requirements are basically like made over there to make sure that your extension is accessible and it satisfies the given conditions that the Docker desktop has. Because Docker desktop is a pretty great product, both from a design and both from like and a functionality point of view. So it needs to be sure that your extension also follows the same kind of standards as well before it is officially released.
Okay, okay.
Uh, yeah. So once going back to the quick start, I guess we have already like initialized our extension. What we can do right now is that we can build this extension on our machine. So now what I'm going to do is like, I'm on my root directory. So I can just say like docker build, and this is what I can specify a tag. And I can just say the same thing right over here. Harsh Casper, that's my username. And Harsh Casper extension colon latest. And once I do that, okay, there are, okay, I guess I was not on the root directory. Yeah. And as soon as I do that, it will start building my extension. Since I have already done a very simple, like kind of a mock demo before this meetup, I already have the cache for this particular image. And as you
Okay.
can see on my, yeah, as you can see right over here, I can see that my Docker image has already been built and it is available right now. So once we do that, what we can do is like we can say Docker extension install, and I can say my extension. And as soon as I click that, it will basically ask me if I really want to continue with this particular thing, because extension will install the binaries and it will install some commands and access files on your machine. I can just say yes. And it will install this extension called as Harsh Casper Harsh Casper extension colon latest. And now my extension is basically available on Docker desktop. So if I go on my Docker desktop setup, just give me, yeah, sorry, not here. Yeah. So you'll get to see that I have this Harsh Casper extension right over
Okay.
here. And this is a very simple demonstration of how an extension might look like. So it's a basic page that is rendered by Material UI using the Docker theme. And there is this simple button over here called as call backend. What I can do is like, I can just click upon this and I'm basically getting this simple message, hello, JSON message that has been already encoded into my Golang backend service. So this is an example of what a simple extension might look like. So what do you think, Koti? How does it look?
Yes, I'm just wondering like how quick it came up. Like usually when we say right, for example, if you take a scenario of VS Code, there are
Yep.
lots of plugins available extensions. So if you just wanted
Exactly.
to build, like it took lots and lots of efforts. And when I see extension and all, I thought like it will be very much difficult. You need to learn and do lots and lots of stuff. But in a couple of clicks, I got my extension ready, and it is readily, available to use. So
Exactly.
I'm feeling like, yeah. Okay.
I guess that's like one of the good parts about the Docker extensions team, because they have put out a lot of efforts to make sure that the extensions API is really stable. And they have a lot of documentation, they have a lot of examples to make sure that you are successful with your extensions initiative. So if you are a company or if you're a startup that is looking to build out an extension, you should not face like a lot of troubles while building this out, because this is pretty much in the beta stage right now. And people should not really feel lost while they are trying to build out an extension for the first time.
This leads my one more simple question. It might be stupid, but
Yep.
just to understand, right? So,
Hmm.
what are the things I need to learn to build this? Like in terms of programming, like basically, if you see
Hmm.
the real time environment and a lot of the people who are making use of this Docker Kubernetes or DevOps engineers, they might be having
Hmm.
some little bit programming knowledge compared to the traditional
Yep.
developers. They might be running
Yep.
some scripts, or they might be running shell script or Python scripts and things like that. So they're
Hmm.
not much into development and all.
Yep.
So and this particular product is like mostly in DevOps hands. So
Exactly.
how difficult is it for DevOps team to build their own
Hmm.
extension for any of the purpose, and what are the things they need to learn before trying to get into this building some extension like that?
Yep. I guess in most of the cases, I have seen like extensions are being built using React and using Golang. So Golang is basically being used for the backend part, and React is being used for building the user interface. Uh, what you can basically do is like if you don't have a lot of experience, you can spend some time learning a bit of React, because the code over here is pretty much self-explanatory. And what you can basically do is like you can try to explore the extensions SDK, and you can try to just go through the developer guides to make sure that you understand this, and you can try building this out yourself. So extensions API is pretty very well detailed over here and very well documented. So you can like pick up on these specific things and you can start building out these things. Just basically hack around initially, and then you will have a definite idea of how you can build this extension out. So I guess that can be like one of the best ways in which you can start building this extension out for yourself. And if you're from DevOps team, you can try to enrobe some help from some front end team or some back end team who might have some experience using Golang or let's say React, so that even they can help you in getting started with this extension. So personally, like
Uh,
in my own company, we worked around with a front end developer who had pretty good experience with using React. And this is how we basically made sure that we can get this extension up and ready.
okay, okay, got it, got
Yep.
it.
Yep. I guess apart from this, like you can also like do some like hacky stuff with the Docker extension. For example, you can run entire static sites through your Docker desktop extension itself. Would you like to take a look onto this?
Yes, definitely. If you
Yeah.
have, I know you are running in a tight schedule, but
No,
if
no
you can
worries.
give us a couple of minutes, we'll be happy.
Sure, definitely. So I have this very simple static site that I developed during my Google season of docs back in 2021. So this is a community website for an open source community called as Mojo Global. What I'm going to do is like I will be basically running this entire static website inside my Docker desktop itself using Docker extension. And
What?
it is very easy to do. What I can basically go is like I can just go to my terminal. Yeah, we'll go over here. I can just say git clone this. And it's a simple Docusaurus website. So Docusaurus is basically a documentation framework that was built by Facebook, which is called as Meta right now. And it is built upon React itself. So if you are a team that is trying to build a documentation site or building a knowledge bases, I guess you can simply use Docusaurus because it provides a lot of different functionalities. And you can not just only build documentation sites, you can build any kind of website using Docusaurus itself, including landing pages, product pages, and more of that. So I'm just going to use this community website as a base to showcase like how easy it is for you to present your static sites as a Docker extension itself. So I
Okay,
do see that it
till it
is,
comes up, right? Like I have one more question. So,
yep.
which is like whenever we are dealing with fetching up a lot of images and doing a lot of stuff here. And in our
Mm-hmm.
previous case, like in local stack, when you are exploring, if we
Yeah.
stop, just click stop, everything is going, everything is vanished, like nothing was there.
Mm-hmm.
So what if I'm developing something and accidentally I stopped or I removed something? So
Mm-hmm.
how difficult is it to get back, or is there any chance that I can get back that things which I have done? Or
Are you
basically, I'm talking
asking
about
this?
persistence. Yes.
Yeah. So are you asking this in the case of local stack itself, isn't it?
Not specifically local stack, any extension
Mhm.
that we are dealing with, right? So we'll
Okay.
put in some data, like we'll play around it and we'll
Mm-hmm.
add some data and we'll explore with that data, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And in between, accidentally, instead of closing or something, or if I removed accidentally something, so
Mm-hmm.
how difficult is it to get that back, or is it possible at the first? If it is possible, then how difficult it is?
I might not be the best person to speak about this because I've not came across this case yet, but I don't think that it would be possible to get the data back. So that's
Okay,
a
okay.
specific trouble with this.
So can we do something like that, like this,
Maybe yes.
like whenever we are building some extension or something, if I
Yeah.
put some volume and if I
Mhm.
that can be done. Do you have any idea on that?
Exactly. So I guess we can pass on this feedback to the Docker team, and they might be able to do something regarding that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now that we have installed the whole community website, I can just do a yarn start right here, and you will get to see that my port is running upon localhost 3000. Like that's where React apps basically run. And Docusaurus under the hood is a simple React app itself. What I'm going to do is like I will just expose this particular static site that is running on my localhost 3000 as a Docker extension. So to basically do that, what I have done is like I have cloned the extensions SDK. So this is a sample like repository where you can get to see like different extensions that people have built. And you can get to see that there are simple extensions like there is a minimal front end, there is a minimal back end, there is a community sample extension. What I'm going to do is like I can just go to the React itself, and over here you can get to see that it has got a client, it has got a make file, it has got a Docker file, and it's basically exposing a simple React user interface itself through a Docker extension. So to install this extension, I'm just going to say make build extension using the standard makefile command that I have. It will start building up my image right over here. That's going to take some time. And once this is done, I can just say like Docker extension install. And then I can say like, okay, Docker React extension colon latest. So basically install this extension for me. And once this is done, I can just go to my Docker desktop right over here, and you can get to see that there is a UI extension right here. So every time I click upon click me, it is just going to show me a hello world message. And this is a standard default template for any of the React developers who are trying to get started with Docker extension for the first time. But now what you can do is like you can try to forward this particular port uh, to this Docker extension itself. So there is this option called as, yeah, maybe not here, maybe here, yeah. So there is this option called as Docker extension dev UI source. So in this case, what you can basically do is like you can specify the source, basically the user interface source for your Docker desktop. And this is a very handy way for you to start developing your Docker extension. Because now what you can do is like you can try to create your extensions UI in a completely separate manner. And you can just try to plug in this to your Docker extension, and you can get to see if the services are actually working out or not. So if I just go and click upon this, you will see that the UI source for the extension has been changed to localhost 3000. And now I can get to see that my static site is pretty much running upon Docker desktop itself.
Okay.
Yeah,
Basically, we are not packaging our entire code in Docker
exactly.
image. We are not building, and we are just
Yep,
redirecting from there to here.
exactly. But in the later case, what you can do is like you can try to migrate that thing to the Docker extension. And
Mhm.
once you build the image once again, everything will be available by default. So this was a quick way for you to like debug your extension. It is a feature that we also provide so that you can easily check everything out on a separate tab, and you can get to see the developer tools so that you can like inspect the whole browser pan and everything around that, so that the entire debugging experience for you is quite easy itself.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah. So that was pretty much about the extensions thing itself. And I guess it pretty much wraps up the whole thing that I wanted to talk about. So thanks again for having me for this meetup. And I hope I was able to provide some
Yes,
value to this.
definitely, definitely, yes. Thank you so much, Harsh, for spending time. And like I mentioned, it's a busy working day, and you
Yeah.
have given us a slot for and gave us a wonderful session. It was no doubt it is very much helpful. Audience,
Thank you.
for your information also, right? I know Harsh from a long time. He's wonderful human being, and if you have any queries, right? In exploring any of the things, whether not only that Docker desktop or Docker extensions which we have talked today, anything related to DevOps, or if you're trying to build out anything, you can post your questions in this comments and this section. Or I'll what I also can do is I'll take permission from Harsh, and I'll provide his LinkedIn profile details in the comment section. So you can reach out to him, and you can get your questions answered. Thank you so much once again, Harsh, for joining us. And we
Yeah.
had a wonderful time, no doubt about it. And we'll definitely want to host you again in our channel. We'll have a detailed discussion on that. And
Yeah.
yes, it is a wonderful session, I can say.
Sure. Thanks a lot. And hope all of you have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. And if there is anything that I can possibly help with, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or maybe Twitter.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
yep, we'll do that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.